Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the second session of 2 of questions and answers. We had a detailed conversation with our North Wales brother Javed, and we will touch upon some of the points, but we've had a caller who's called in on 01274 214299. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear caller.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Like previous caller, I just wanted your opinion, Islamic opinion on this. The way Qatar presented like the biggest game of the world and the biggest gathering of European nation and the other religion, and it started with the with recitation, and the way it was presented is if on state level we give pride to our nation and give pride to Muslim, it will make a huge difference. But they always demonize, they always what's happening in Muslim world. But at least not 5 billion, but maybe 3 billion at least people watch this. I'm not a fan of football match or football. I don't like football myself, but I'm just saying as a whole world's audience, if you the way Qatar attracted them, and the way instead of daru is dawab, recitation is like giving dates and these ayat, and there were banners of Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hadith, and the way Ghanim, I'm not wrong, Ghanim Mufta, the way he did recitation, a handicapped boy, 14-year-old, and he's a scholar, like inspirational, like scholar or something. I don't know. But he inspires people towards Islam as well, and the way he impressed people, and the way this madrasa student, they came and they did recitation of Surah Rahman, and there was where 48 countries players were gathered. Imam stood there and led namaz, and that was really, really amazing. I know $230 billion, you can lift the whole Middle East if you want to, but that is not the priority anyway. But a good thing is we should discuss positive thing and always stay positive and take this as an example and as a pride. And if on state level, if we force our rulers to at least give us pride, then it makes a huge difference. At least 3 billion people, if they watch the ceremony, they will have something in their mind that why Islam is and how Qatar presented everything, and they told the world that these are our rules, these are our Islamic rules, and we will follow them no matter how much we lose revenue, we lose interest, we lose support from big powers. We don't care as long as our rules for 1 month, we are not breaking for anybody else.
Jazakallah khair for that, sister. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for calling. I'll answer that shortly, inshallah. It's a follow-on from our brother who phoned before the break. We have another caller who's called in on 01274 214299. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear caller.
Walaikum salam.
How are
My
you?
question is, can we buy a house on interest? Because some ulama Ikram said we can buy one house on interest, it is halal. Is that correct?
Okay, Jazakallah khair, sister. I'll answer that, inshallah. Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so I'll answer the third question first because it's short and it's straight to the point. Sister asked, can we buy a house on interest? And I have answered this previously, but even if it's for one house that you're buying to live in, then the ruling is quite simple, really, in that no, you cannot enter into a transaction which involves riba, which means that you would have to pay interest. In fact, that is of benefit to you in the dunya as much as it is a benefit to you the hereafter, because when you do get a mortgage, unfortunately, you might get a mortgage for 150, 140, 180, 200. We end up paying back £350,000. So it's actually causing a detriment to you in a significant way. But nowadays, unfortunately, we don't look at alternative ways of raising funds. In fact, you're seeing now non-Muslim companies, non-Muslim organizations looking at these shared ownership deals where the bank buys the property and then sells the property to the person, the client, and also charges them rent. So depending on the portion that is sold to the client, so let's just say they sell 20% to the client and 80% is owned by the bank, then the bank charges obviously rent for the 80% because the bank owns it, and they don't charge rent for the 20% because the person owns it. And therefore, slowly over time, the person purchases, keeps buying parts and also pays rent on there. So there are many options available like that a person will need to look into. So we've had two callers on both sides of the break speaking about the World Cup. It's obvious it's there. It's not necessarily an elephant in the room. A couple of specific questions. One is, why haven't Iqra TV shown any clips from the football? That's really just due to a copyright issue, that anything which is owned by an organization, say like FIFA, or if it's something that's being shown, broadcasted by, say, BBC or ITV, then there needs to be an agreement in place to use that footage. Now, if you're watching the news, and I do see the news appear, Iqra TV News, then you'll see that there are clips shown on there, because for the sake of news, then yes, they can do that. But it's split-second clips. It's not like long duration of clips. So that's that point. Has anybody spoke about the World Cup that's ongoing? I know Mona Fazal Sab spoke about it a little bit. I know I have spoke about it a little bit. I appreciate I have not spoke about it in great detail. But what I have spoke about is the power of sport. And also the Muslims where they find themselves now. Because, unfortunately, we've been sort of beaten from pillar to post for what, close to a century now, if not even longer than a century. And we cannot, compete with the world powers on a military Muslim, when I say we, and I'm saying Muslim countries, cannot compete with the super military powers. Then, therefore, they look at other ways of trying to get some level of success. So we saw this obviously when Khabib was the world champion in MMA, especially his fight against Conor McGregor. And we saw that with Conor McGregor because Conor McGregor sort of epitomized the kind of hedonistic, drinking alcohol, sort of womanizing and that kind of mindset. And we had this complete opposite of Khabib, who was this practicing Muslim, who did not ascribe any of his successes to himself, but ascribed the successes to Allah. And we saw Conor obviously bad-mouthing Khabib, saying that he's the best, he's number one, a show of arrogance, a show of pride. And when obviously Khabib won, that gave a lot of Muslims confidence, and it gave them some level of, we use the word pride, but I use the word, pride with speech marks, that, alhamdulillah, Muslims are good at something. It made people feel good. And we see that as well, whether it's Amir Khan or whether it's, now Adam Azim, so boxers, whether it's MMA fighters, like we're seeing now Islam in MMA fighting, whatever it might be, the new battleground seems to be on sports. And when Muslims succeed on sports, we get very, very happy. So when, Pogba plays really well, we get very happy because, Pogba's Muslim. We don't necessarily look at how much of a Muslim they are, how good Muslim they are. We don't really care because they're Muslim and that's it. Many of these sports Muslims unfortunately drink alcohol. They're freely mixed. Some don't, and that's why we get happy when we see people like Moin Ali and Adil Rashid playing for England. They have full beards. They practice their religion. So as soon as the champagne bottle is going to be open, when England won the World T20 Championship, and the champagne bottles were going to be open, then Moin Ali and Adil Rashid moved before they were open. Anyway, I'll carry on that conversation shortly. We've had another caller who's called in on 01274214299. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear caller.
Wa alaikum salam, Sheikh. I'm just Javed again from
Mashallah, you're back.
Mashallah, I'm so proud of you that you're mentioning such beautiful names of such success. May I enlighten your memory, not anything else, but your memory. Mohammed Salah, when he started playing for Liverpool.
Yes.
The amount of Scousers realize what a beautiful religion this must be. Right? Such a beautiful footballer. And he used to bow. He used to go into sujood every time he scored.
That's
right? And the amount of Scousers wanted to know about Islam. And our sister, the one lady who rang after me, yes? Can I enhance her beautiful input? Are you aware, my darling sister, the amount of scholars that went to Qatar, right? Simply the likes of, I'm getting frustrated now, our lecturer from India.
Zakir Naik.
Dr.
Zakir Naik, yes.
As you know yourself, he was threatened, his family was threatened, and they took him off the TV. He's in Saudi Arabia now. He was invited to go to Qatar to hold such beautiful lectures, such beautiful gift. And this is what we are lacking of. And, the amount of funds you get funded by our sisters and brothers, our governments from Middle East, only you know that. Al-Akhirah is very highly respected. So if you did invest £1 million into showing all these games, or even, could you imagine how many proud children there will be? This young lady who rang about the mortgage on her house, she must be young. You can tell by her voice she's a young person. So, Sheikh, you've got lovely viewers. You've got viewers of all ages. Over the months and years, I've heard children ringing you and asking you all kind of questions. I beg you to understand, we have to stop this. When there's a good thing happening with the Ummah, when there's a good thing happening with all the Muslims, we should be proudly showing it to them. I mean, I'll just go back into the history. You know better than me. You know better than me. When all the soldiers were brushing their teeth with maswak and all, and they were, the battle was going to take place, and they were outnumbered, I believe, by 50-1, or forgive me if I'm exaggerating. They were outnumbered by thousands, yeah? And these soldiers of the opposite side, when they saw them brushing their teeth, and they said, what, they're going to eat us up? They're going to eat us alive? And they all run away. Why? Because our iman was so beautiful and so truthful. We were God-fearing Muslims. We were God-fearing people. They were the best Muslim because they were with the times of our beautiful Nabi. They were at the times of all the beautiful companions. We have got the biggest gift now, the biggest miracle in the world, the Holy Quran. What better gift can you have?
100%.
So please, I beg you to show these programs. Stop worrying about the funds. Stop worrying. You are not short a penny or two. Jazakallah.
Clearly, he's got access to my current account. MashaAllah. May Allah put more barakah in all our funds. Alhamdulillah. So, carrying on that, Jazakallah khair for that, carrying on that conversation. In terms of, we know that, unfortunately, certain powers that be do not appreciate Islam. They know about Islam. It's not that Islam is unknown to them. But Islam is obviously seen as a world power, and therefore it's seen as a problem in that regard. But Qatar, alhamdulillah, has put on, yes, there is a lot of money spent. It's rumored to be 220 billion. That's a heck of a lot of money. And people may argue that, look, that kind of money could have potentially alleviated poverty in Africa. It could have built solar panels across the Middle East, which would mean that there would be no need for oil. It could have, taken virtually every citizen in the Ummah out of poverty. If we say that there's, 2 billion Muslims on the planet, but, at least half of them are in good state and 1 billion aren't, then that would have been £2 for each one of them. So, £220 for each one of them. So when you look at these kind of figures, yes, they are eye-watering. And, they do make a person think that, especially when you start comparing it to the World Cups which came before, and we're talking about, 10 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion, whatever. So it's, not even that, some 1 billion, some even less. So it's a sizable amount of money. However, putting that to one side as well, there's been great effort to, especially engaging with the masses. You cannot change people whose minds are already made up about which type of lifestyle they prefer and which type of lifestyle they wish to live. And we know that. So, but then there's a huge number of people that are kind of in the middle that will sway one way or sway the other way. And what it has meant for this World Cup, what it has meant for the football, is many of those non-Muslims who may not have gone to Qatar. And let's not kid ourselves. There are many non-Muslims that do travel to Muslim countries like Dubai. We know it's the rich man's playground. So people have been going towards Dubai for years. The nightlife, the lifestyle, the food and everything else that goes with it. But in terms of large numbers and in terms of the cameras and their attention, this has been, this is a one-off, so to speak. This is a very rare situation to have occurred. And, alhamdulillah, Qatar has, in the main, tried its very best. It's not easy. It tried its very best to be as appealing as it can be. There are gifts given to virtually every single person who attends to the football stadium. There's dates being given outside and cups of coffee being given outside for free. There's fans who have been invited in by rich sheikhs, and I don't mean me, into their palaces, and they've been wandering around. And the hospitality has been second to none. But also what it's been able to do is highlight the hypocrisy that exists, that we know without doubt exists. And people have seen that, hold on, this is wrong. On the one hand, we're saying this, but when somebody else did this, recently they were showing Mesut Ozil, who had raised his concerns about the Rohingya Muslims and how the German football team and the management dealt with him as a consequence. And yet then we had the full German football team putting their hands over their mouths, giving the suggestion that they're not free to speak their minds, which is to put a armband on, and that was okay. So it just shows that the German football team was picking and choosing as to whose lives are worth standing for, what issues are worth standing for, and what issues aren't worth standing for. And that was open to anybody who's got a clean heart and a good mind. They would see it. Obviously, those who are deep in kufr, those who are deep in their way of life, they will not see to it. They will only see that our way is the correct way and this is a backward way. Many commentators have said, look, there was colonization of the lands, but there is obviously now colonization of the minds. We're being told to think in a certain way. We're being told to behave in a certain way. But Brother Javed, last point he made, which is the key point, I think, here, is that we should be proud, we're Muslims, not because the non-Muslim acknowledges you, not because the world looks up at you, not because the world points at you and says you are upon haqq. Rather, you in your own heart should feel good that you are a believer because you are a believer. We do not need certification from anybody. We do not need ratifying by anybody. We don't need a shabash on the back from anybody. We don't need a, well done, keep it going from anybody. If our Allah is happy with us, if our Nabi is happy with us, then what else does a person need? So it doesn't matter if the whole world joins you or the whole world looks at you and says, you know what you're doing is great. Or if the whole world goes against you and says, you know what, you're a strange one, you're weird, you're backwards, whatever. That shouldn't change as an iota. That is a sign of true Iman. And that is, if we have that, alhamdulillah, it will not bother us the slightest. The Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, it did not bother them the slightest when the world was with them or the world was against them. They knew what was right. They knew what was haqq. They knew they needed to fulfill it. Of course, they preferred it. Of course, they preferred it to have people supporting them than people being against them. That's just human nature. You know, why would anybody prefer to climb a mountain when they can just walk on a straight path? Anybody would choose the straight path. But when the mountain came, they did not panic. They did not give up. They knew they rolled their sleeves up and worked that extra little bit harder. So Jazakumullah khair for our brother Javed for the input, and thank you for calling again. Jazakumullah khair for our sister to further that conversation as well. Alhamdulillah, I thought I was going to go out with a duck, but we've got 3 or 4 phone calls on the last day. That's fantastic. I hope you all have a blessed and relaxed and full of Iman weekend and the Monday, Tuesday when we return. And I look forward to seeing you all again, inshallah, on Wednesday on questions and answers. Jazakumullah khair for all of you. May Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.